following program is exclusively produced and distributed by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc., all rights reserved.
Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action.
It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week. Hi, this is Dick Dinman, and this will be the second of two shows devoted to the brilliant director and co-writer of some of the world's most iconic films, including Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Billy Wilder, whose films, to quote the American Film Institute, have stood the test of time, and then some. My guest, Joseph McBRIDE, and I will compare notes on all of the Billy Wilder classics that this once-in-a-lifetime mega talent has both directed and co-written. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon. My distinguished guest today is the internationally acclaimed author and film historian, Joseph McBRIDE, the author of 22 books, including biographies of Frank Capra, Steven Spielberg, John Ford, Howard Hawks, and Orson Welles. His latest literary triumph is a masterful critical study of the films of Billy Wilder, which is titled Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge, which is available from Columbia University Press. Incidentally, many of the Billy Wilder films that Joseph and I discussed during the course of our show are available on Blu-ray, courtesy of Kino Lorber, Home Entertainment. Joseph McBRIDE, welcome back to part 2 of our salute to Billy Wilder, and there's no one I know who I'd rather be talking to about Mr. Wilder other than you, because your book, Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge, which is available through Columbia University Press, for me is the ultimate critical survey of Billy Wilder's films. And it's an honor to have you here, and I couldn't be more delighted.
Well, thank you, Dick. It's so nice of you to say that about the book, and it's really fun to talk to you always about films because you're such a maven and Billy Wilder fan like me, and how. So it's fun to talk to you.
The next film is available from the Warner Archive. They are releasing the film on Blu-ray, and it's Love in the Afternoon with Gary Cooper, Audrey Hepburn, and Maurice Chevalier. This film, to me, and maybe I'm being too harsh, lacks charm, which is the element that it most needs. Yeah. And for me, it's sabotaged through no fault of his own by Gary Cooper, who should not have been cast at that point in his life in the role. I can see him playing the role 20 years before, or 15 years before. I can see it. But it's so depressing to see how Wilder tries to cover up Cooper's age in so many shots, in so many obvious ways. It to me is a film that's striving to be a light bonbon, which I'm sorry. It just falls on its face.
Well, I agree with you that the casting ruins the film, and oddly enough, the first person they thought of would have been better. Yul Brynner was considered for the part, and
I didn't know that.
yeah,
Yes.
he would be closer in age to Audrey Hepburn, and he was a wonderful actor, and he had that exotic quality.
Yes.
And in the novel, I read the novel that's based on is actually a very good novel, Ariane, by Claude Anet, and it's a very dark novel about sexuality where she is pretending to be a woman of the world and leading men on and stuff. And the film is sort of conflicted because Audrey Hepburn is a sexually inexperienced young woman who wants to be corrupted and wants experience, which is a theme that Wilder deals with in his work frequently.
Yes.
And so she picks this older guy who is, as you say, a depressing, charmless roue, and it's a rather sad film in that sense to watch her being seduced and corrupted by this old guy, and
right.
It's sort of a misfire. I.L. Diamond started with Wilder on this film, and I interviewed Diamond, and I said, which of your films with Wilder do you like best? He said, well, I guess I'd have to go with Everybody's Feeling and say Some Like It Hot in the Apartment, but he said, I have a real fondness for Love in the Afternoon and 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. And I guess he had a fondness for Love in the Afternoon partly because it kicked off their collaboration.
Sure.
But one of the things Wilder said was very interesting was that he said in real life Gary Cooper was that kind of guy.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But he said people expected him to be like the incorruptible Marshal in High Noon.
Yeah.
And they couldn't buy him as a philandering guy. It just didn't fit his image.
Right.
That people expected.
Right. Now, the next film, After Love in the Afternoon, is available again from Kino Lorber Home Entertainment, and it's one of my favorites, Witness for the Prosecution. I add that I played the Tyrone Power role in the theater, in a version in the theater, and I would have
preferred you in the film, frankly.
Well, yeah, Power.
I'm not a big Tyrone Power fan.
Well, I think he can be very interesting in films like Nightmare Alley and certain swashbucklers, but the role was offered to William Holden first. This I know, and Holden was at his height then and turned it down, and out of desperation they got Tyrone Power in what would sadly turn out to be his final film role. He is, unfortunately, the weak element in the film. I don't get the impression he was very comfortable in the part.
Yeah, he seems uncomfortable, doesn't he? And he's a very unlikable character, but Wilder loved Charles Laughton, who he thought was the best actor he ever worked with.
Oh, my
He's so wonderful in the film, and they really build up the part. It's based on a play by Agatha Christie.
Oh, sure.
And they build up the part of Charles Laughton's barrister character, and they added a good role for Elsa Lanchester, his wife.
Marvelous.
Very funny as
Marvelous.
a nurse, and they're bickering all through the film. It's a bravura performance by Laughton, and that really makes the film terrific. And Dietrich has a great supporting role, and it's a
all I can tell you when this film came out, I was still in public school, and we kids ran around constantly saying, "You wanna kiss me, ducky?"
No kidding. Really? Yeah. The film made a big impression on kids, didn't it?
It did.
Interesting.
I think it's a wonderful film,
well, it exemplifies Wilder's fondness for the masquerade. That's the theme that runs through his work. People putting on new identities, and disguises, and running scams. And that I realized, I thought about that a long time. Why does he do that? And it's related to being an exile several times over, because exiles have to assume new identities, and it's a kind of a masquerade to be a citizen of a new country. And Wilder felt that it was an integral part of his view of life.
Right. The next film, of course, is Some Like It Hot, which, by the way, Kino Lorber has just released in 4K. And I haven't received it yet, but I'm sure it looks astonishing. Now, I have to tell you, I mean, Some Like It Hot is perfect. A perfect film, a perfect comedy. Perfectly constructed in every way. There's no need to spend a lot of time on it. But I will tell you, my impression from day one was that this film, in structure, is essentially a road film with Bing, Bob, and Dottie L'Amour.
Oh, that's interesting.
It could have been done as very similarly as a road film, and I heard that Billy Wilder was considering Danny Kaye, Bob Hope, Mitzi Gaynor, and some other names. It is a perfect comedy film, but it is, to my mind, a road film.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many ways you could look at it. I did the commentaries for that and The Apartment and the new Blu-ray editions from Kino Lorber. I have a lot to say about it. Some Like It Hot was the film that got me interested. Well, as I said, I saw 7 Year Itch, and I didn't really connect it with a director at the time.
No.
But Some Like It Hot made a big impression on me when I was 11. Could you imagine going to that film? I don't know how I got into it because it was rated B, objectionable in part by the Legion of Decency, and I was still a Catholic repressed kid at the time. But it opened up a new horizon of sexuality for me and probably everybody in the American audience. The whole idea of cross-dressing and Monroe with her extremely risque dresses by Ori Kelly, who won the Oscar for that film.
Yeah.
It's a very sexy film, and it kind of knocked me out when I saw it. But the screenplay by Wilder and Diamond is just a gem. Every word is wonderful and perfect, and the acting is sublime. Monroe, Howard Hawks, and Billy Wilder were the only two directors who managed to direct her twice, because she was difficult to work with. She gave Wilder a hard time on that film. But Hawks told me he thought she had nothing realistic about her. She was a fantasy figure on screen, and that's how she is in 7 Year Itch. But in Some Like It Hot, she plays a realistic, three-dimensional, complex, very touching, real person. And that's quite an achievement. It's one of her best roles.
I especially agree on three-dimensional.
Yeah. She's very, very rich character, very moving, and the whole film, the film is a serious study, actually, about how men should treat women, which is kind of the Lubitsch theme underneath all his humor. It's about Joe, played by Tony Curtis, being a cad who mistreats and uses women, and he tries that with Monroe, and then he realizes he should be a mensch, to quote The Apartment.
Yeah.
And he winds up treating her better, and that's the serious subject of the film. And my wife, who's a psychologist, often told me she thought it was a feminist film because it's literally about men learning to walk in women's shoes and finding out what women are like. And she told that to Billy Wilder when I introduced her to Wilder, and he said, "Oh, I don't think anybody's told me that before." But it's really true. It is a feminist film.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, it's a film that's much beloved by everybody, and deservedly so. Well,
probably the funniest American sound comedy, I would say.
Yeah, I have some others who I think are very funny, but I would agree this is certainly the top 5 of the funniest films, sound films ever made. Well, now we go. And I don't want to spend much time on it because the next film is so perfect in every way, shape, and form. And I'm talking about The Apartment. It's a perfect film. I don't know what more to say.
Well,
In every area, I mean, here, Billy Wilder balances the sadness and the happiness of the lives of their characters in such a brilliant way. But I will tell you, you'll be surprised when I tell you who I think steals the show. Who do you think I think steals the show?
Well, you could say Fred McMurray.
I am saying Fred McMurray.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely amazing in the role. And here we go. Paul Douglas, a very, very good actor, was originally set for the role. And frankly, as good as Paul Douglas was, I do not think he could have approached Fred McMurray in that particular role. He was
kind of a heavy,
Yeah,
he would have been too heavy-ish.
Yeah.
Well, I once asked Wilder, I gave him the Career Achievement Award from the Los Angeles Film Critics in 1995, and I had lunch with him and Jack Lemmon at the event. And I said, what do you think is your best film? He said, The Apartment. And I said, why? And he said, because it's my best mixture of comedy and drama, just like you said,
yeah.
Dick. And he said, that was the mixture I was looking for, trying to achieve all my career, he said.
No, I totally agree with that. This is one of the greatest films ever made. It's a perfect film. You know how many times you love a film and you sometimes say, yeah, but there was that one scene that didn't work. There's nothing. There's not a moment, not a single isolated moment that doesn't work about this film. It is great.
One thing I'd recommend for listeners and viewers of Wilder films is read the screenplays of these great films.
Yeah.
And quite a number of Wilder's screenplays that he wrote with Brackett and Diamond are published. And sometimes they go out of print, but you can find used copies and you can find them on the internet. And The Apartment is a marvelous screenplay. It's one of the great screenplays, as is Some Like It Hot.
I know, I have it.
And they're fun to read, too, because screenplays are often rather dry to read. But Wilder often made his screenplays entertaining, and he would put in jokes and things like that. And The Apartment is just, it's beautiful prose and great dialogue and very, very complex. One of the most daring scenes in terms of blending comedy and drama, I would point out, is when Lemon picks up the wonderful Hope Holiday. They're both drunk at a bar.
Yeah.
And he brings her home, and then he finds out that Shirley MacLaine is passed out from an overdose in his apartment, and it's a very daring blend of near tragedy and farce. And Diamond and Wilder felt it was a very risky scene, but if it came off, it would make the film, and if it didn't come off, it might ruin the film. But it came off brilliantly with the timing and the complexity of, it's like real life is full of situations like that when, as John Lennon put it, life is what happens when you're making other plans, which I think is a good motto for screenwriters.
It is. Well, we certainly agree on The Apartment, which is available from Kino Lorber Home Entertainment. And now we go to Billy Wilder and Diamond's next film, 1, 2, 3. Now, I had a very interesting two experiences with this film. I went to see it when it came out at the Plaza Theater on the east side of New York on a Saturday night. The house was packed. Everything worked. It was one of the most uproarious experiences I've ever had in the cinema.
Great.
Cut to 4 weeks later. It opens on the multiples, and I go with my English teacher, Robert West, to see it again, and I tell him how great it is. So we go to the matinee at the Lowe's Kings on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. The house is deserted, except for maybe 5 or 6 people. The film doesn't play at all. It was one of the most deflating experiences I ever had, because I sold this film to my friend who was also my English teacher, and it just didn't play. I still have a great affection for this film, despite the fact that it caused James Cagney to
caused him to retire for a long time.
But I still have great affection for this film, even though it really is just a series of gags.
Well, maybe it needed an audience, like you say, a big audience to roll with the gags.
Well, not just a big audience, a sophisticated audience.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, it's a very. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful political, satirical gags.
Yeah.
It deals with the Cold War and divided Berlin. It's again a grim background, kind of like Foreign Affair,
right?
But very farcical. I find it too strident in some ways, and parts of it are not as funny as they should be, or not as witty as they should be.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the parts in which Cagney remakes Horst Buchholz, the young communist, into a capitalist are really hysterically funny.
They really are.
Yeah, and it's based on a Molnar play, which Wilder saw in Germany, and the guy who played the lead was known for fast talking. He was a comedian who talked super fast. So Wilder made James Cagney do the same thing, and Cagney found that painful and exhausting, especially because he had to say every word that Wilder and Diamond wrote. So they had some friction, but he is wonderful in the role, and when he's taking command, he's great. Some of the minor characters are very good, like his assistant Schlemmer.
Yeah,
the ex-Nazi, and
but some are just retreads.
Yeah, some like the commissars are kind of not as interesting as the ones in the Notchka.
No.
And I think Arlene Francis is very shallow as the wife.
I totally agree with you. For me, it's a case of total miscasting. Every line she says simply doesn't work.
Yeah, it's very phony delivery of lines, and the writing
I'm surprised.
falters. And Pamela Tiffin, I think, is painful to watch. She's such an idiot.
Well, maybe, but I was 12 at the time, and Pamela Tiffin to me was ultra hot. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the way people felt at the time. I mean, she's very cute in the role, but she's. I mean, it's just kind of silly. Would-be satire.
It is.
And so the film is sort of dragged down to kind of TV sitcom level by some of the characters.
And parts of it really are strained.
Yeah.
There's no question. It's Wilder and Diamond reaching a little bit and not always achieving their goal.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is exclusively produced and released by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc. All rights reserved. Now we're going to go to Irma La Douce, which is released by our friends at Kino Lorber Home Entertainment. And I must tell you, and maybe I've just been influenced by the fact that my mother took me to see the Broadway play, which was light, delicate, minimalist, a charming bonbon of a play with delightful music, tuneful score. I am sorry, I cannot stand Billy Wilder's Irma La Douce. To me, it's an elephantine monstrosity. Otherwise, I like it. But
what else?
To me, it's big. Well, we have to say, I believe Irma La Douce is Billy Wilder's highest-grossing film.
Yeah, it made it a lot of money and made him a lot of money. Well, I have a personal fondness for that film. It meant a lot to me. I think Billy Wilder, I call him my sex education teacher, because as a repressed Catholic kid, not only did I have my eyes opened by Some Like It Hot, but then when Irma La Douce came out, I had trouble watching it because I felt guilty. I was still feeling guilty about sex, so I walked out in the middle of it because I was scandalized. And then I went back to see it, and then I made it almost as almost to the end, but the scene in which she has a baby in a church while she's getting married, I thought it was scandalous, so I walked out again. And the third time I went to see it, I finally managed to sit through it, and that was a big achievement for me. I see that as a step in my maturation. And one of my old friends told me that he came back to Milwaukee when he was a kid in 1964. He had left and moved out of town. And he said I made him go to see a double bill of Some Like It Hot and Irma La Douce in downtown Milwaukee. I was still seeing it again. So it is rather broad, and I mean, it's beautiful to watch. I mean, great color and sets by Alexander Troner, and McLean and Lemon are delightful. It's somewhat shallow, but it's a funny movie, and
well, I do.
It deals with it's a romance, despite being about prostitution, which was a big theme in Billy Wilder's films. But it's about two characters, kind of like in The Apartment, who are able to transcend the corruption that surrounds them. It's a familiar Wilder theme.
Oh, God, Joe, how can you mention this movie next to The Apartment in the same sentence?
Well, it isn't in the same league, I agree.
Oh, wow. And I frankly think Lemon is miscast, and Shirley MacLaine, to me, just doesn't work for me. She was brilliant, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe the best screen appearance of her ever, I think, may have been The Apartment.
Well, I think that's Wilder's greatest female character.
I would.
The Apartment.
That's interesting. Well, Norma Desmond for me would be.
Well, yeah, actually, you'd have to say, and then Barbara Stanwyck's
come on, we can go on forever.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we could. That's the thing with Wilder. You could start. The other day, I was trying to think of his 10 best films, and then I listed them, and then I thought, on any given day, I could change the order of those films from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all so good,
Yeah. Well, now we come to what surely will be one of our biggest disagreements. You spent a lot of time in your marvelous book praising Billy Wilder's next film, Kiss Me Stupid. All I can tell you is I went to see it because I was a Wilder fan, and I wanted to forgive him for Irma La Douce, which I really did not like at the time. So I went the first day to the Fine Arts Theater in Los Angeles to see Kiss Me Stupid, and I will tell you, I totally agree with all of the negatives. I frankly was appalled. To me, it's an ugly film with people who I don't want to know. I could find.
Have you tried to go back and watch it again, though?
Yes, I didn't try. I did when it came out, and this also. Actually, Olive Films released it on Blu-ray, and of course, as a much, much older individual, I watched the whole thing, and my reaction was precisely the same. First of all, how could Billy Wilder initially even consider working with Peter Sellers? That can never work. This is not a team that could ever work, because Sellers was, again, a brilliant improvisational actor. Always adding, subtracting, adding, doing whatever he wanted. How on earth could Billy Wilder say, I want to work with that man?
Well, we haven't seen the footage, but one of the people I interviewed for my book, Billy Wilder Dancing on the Edge, is Fernando Trueba, who is a Spanish director, friend of Billy Wilder's. And Wilder told him, he said, the best film he ever made was the 6 weeks of shooting with Peter Sellers on Kiss Me Stupid.
Whoa.
Before Sellers had a series of heart attacks and had to leave the film. That is surprising because, as you say, Wilder didn't condone improvisation, and Sellers was brilliant doing that, like in Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
But it worked. I don't know. The thing is, Ray Walston. I love Kiss Me Stupid. I mean, we just disagree.
Yeah.
I think it's a very corrosive satire of American sexual hypocrisy, small-town hypocrisy. And one thing that the only reviewer who liked it at the time was Joan Didion on Vogue magazine. And she said it showed the true country of despair, and in America we prefer not to look at, which is kind of what you were saying. You don't want to know these people.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are real American characters, and Ray Walston, he's kind of like Tom Ewell in that he's a homely guy, an average-looking guy. I like that because, frankly, Peter Sellers would have been more palatable because he's adorable and funny and cute and everything, and a great actor, but we just don't know what he was like in that film. But Walston is the real thing. He's like the guy down the street who you would know, who is sexually frustrated and can't relate to his wonderful wife, and he's desperate to get ahead. And it's a satire of show business. These two songwriters will do anything to get Dean Martin to buy their song, and they even prostitute. The wife becomes a prostitute, and the prostitute becomes the wife, and that's the theme of the film. And it's based on a classic Italian play by Anna Bonacci, which is very successful every time it is done in Europe. But American audiences are, in my opinion, too prudish to understand or relate to the humor of that film. But European audiences always enjoy the ironies and the satire of sexual hypocrisy, and that's what makes the film good. I think it's really wonderfully written by Diamond and Wilder, and Diamond said they were shocked by the negative reaction. They thought it was restoration comedy is what he felt they were writing.
Well, that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah, nobody can agree. Well, but I mean, I like to hear contrary opinions because, to me, that's what's interesting about criticism and serious debates about film, because you can learn from other people's perspectives. You don't have to agree with everybody.
Now, based what you wrote about in your book about Wilder's next film, which is called Fortune Cookie, and available again through Kino Lorber Home Entertainment, this is a film that I think we totally agree on. I dislike the film. I think, other than Walter Matthau, who is genius in the role and deservedly won the Oscar for his performance, Lemon for me is nondescript and a very unrewarding role, and all of the others in the film, including the African-American actor whose name I forgot, and the lady who played Lemon's wife, to me they're all miscast and underwritten. And I just don't find this a very appealing film. And what I gather from your book is you would essentially agree.
Yeah, I also did a commentary on that film. I've done, I think, 8 Wilder films. I think they were running for cover after Kiss Me Stupid. Diamond said they were like a couple who had had a 2-headed child and were afraid to have sexual intercourse again. And they just stared at each other for 6 months, is what he said. They were so shocked. And so they were kind of running for cover. It's sort of overly familiar, going through the motions, Wilder satire. But also it's they were trying to, in a clumsy way, to appear nice in a strange way. Ron Rich, who plays the black character, who's a football player who's mistreated by Lemon, an insurance scam. Ron Rich is rather embarrassing. It's not his fault, but
no.
The character is treated in a way that today seems very condescending. And frankly, even in 1966, I felt that.
Yeah. Because
Wilder and Diamond this is the first sign that they were out of touch with the changing audience.
Yeah.
Because, Black Power was coming in, and black activists were being much more aggressive, et cetera. And here's this black person who is treated as kind of like a pet by these people in the film and mistreated, and it's painful to watch him in that film. And I agree that Lemon's role is unrewarding. Matthau is superb, and that's the film that made him a star. He was a journeyman actor up to that point who played serious roles, etc. And then Wilder figured out the key to his sarcastic, curmudgeonly W.C. Fields persona and created that persona, which Matthau played for the rest of his life very successfully.
Very, very. The next film from Kino Lorber, again, they released a Blu-ray copy of it, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. This, to me, is a very sad, melancholy film. I have a curious affection for it, though I don't feel it totally works. I love Nicholas Rose's score, which is one of his violin concertos, is the basis for it. And the other thing I really like about The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes is the photography of Christopher Chalice, which is absolutely gorgeous. This is a film that I don't think really works, that I go back to constantly. There's something about it I like, but I can't put my finger on it. But for me, and I don't know whether you'll agree, the thing that really killed this film is the casting, because I know that Billy Wilder had originally offered it to Peter O'Toole, who either turned it down or was not available. And I think that would have worked very well. And while these two actors who he hired are excellent in the role, they have no real charisma. As far as I'm concerned, they don't connect with the
Well, I guess
with the
here's
audience.
another case where we diverge our views. I mean, one of the things that impelled me to write this book on Wilder, and I've been a champion of his late work since 1970. My first writing on Wilder was for Film Quarterly with my collaborator Michael Wilmington at the time. It was a career profile, and then we reviewed The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes and gave it a very good review. I love this film. I think it's one of his best. It's a very melancholy, bittersweet love story in which Holmes, who's a kind of a misogynist, it's exploring the mystery of why Holmes couldn't relate to women emotionally, and was he gay or what? And Wilder has a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, but Joe, this film has been
Watson.
this film was supposed to be roadshow, and it had a great deal more footage, and I feel suffers terribly from the fact that so much was cut.
Well, okay, you can read the screenplay. It's online. You can find it. The original screenplay. It was a tragedy in the sense that it was supposed to be a 3-hour and 20-minute film. And Wilder and Diamond spent 10 years working on the script. It was a very ambitious project. And then they had a preview that was not successful. What their intent was to start with 2 comical episodes about Holmes, and it was kind of in an affectionate way a debunking of the myth of Holmes. It's about a time when he fails because his emotions get in the way of his intellect. He was a man of great intellect. And they cut the 2 humorous episodes, so it is more somber than they intended, but I think it works in that regard. The one sequence that I think really is essential that they lost was a flashback to Oxford when Holmes was a young man, and he was in love from afar with a beautiful young woman, and he would watch her, and he was afraid to talk to her, and then he wins a crew race, and his colleagues buy him a prostitute, and it turns out to be the young woman he idolizes and idealizes, and he's totally disenchanted. It's a very powerful sequence in the script, and there's a still from it in my book. And Wilder apparently, at least some reports had it that he had a similar episode when he was a young man, although he denied it to me, but some biographers have talked about that. But there was a disillusionment that Wilder had with romance at some point. And Diamond, his collaborator, said Wilder was a disappointed romantic, and I think that's the key to his work. And
I
his
think
later
that,
work...
well, that's especially a key to this particular film, because that kind of melancholy it seems to be always there in this film.
I would say, the thing that happened in his later career that accounted for his commercial problems was when the screen was liberated in the 60s from the production code. suddenly you could do anything, almost anything, sexually and with language.
Yeah.
And Wilder had been functioning under the old production code and was a master at circumventing it, like Lubitsch was,
Right.
and getting around it and using innuendo. But he wasn't inclined to do the in-your-face sexuality and language that became common. So what he did was, when everybody else was doing the opposite, he became more overtly romantic. And I remember well, in the late 60s and early 70s, the word romantic was like a dirty word for people. If somebody said you're romantic, that was a dirty word. It was the age of free love and everything. And Wilder was defiantly romantic, and I like that about him. And Avanti, as well, is a beautiful film. I think that's very romantic, as is Sherlock Holmes. And I love his later works. I'm a champion of the later work. And I like Robert Stevens and Cohen.
Well, yeah, they're fine. But audiences frankly did not respond at all to this film.
No, it just sort of died, and the studio...
Well, UA killed it. Yeah. You're Not an Artist killed this
Yeah, I remember
film.
seeing it in Milwaukee in a big theater, and there weren't too many people there.
Yeah.
It was not in tune with the times, and Robert Stevens is not a box office draw.
The next film, also available from Kino Lorber, is Avanti. And again, we have a film that I totally disagree with you on. I feel that it was absolutely the wrong time to release this type of film in that particular market. And for me, the film is much, much too long. This is a film that I think should have been cut by 20 minutes or maybe even more.
Painful to hear that.
I know.
I mean, I wouldn't
You
lose
love
the frame of the film. I think if I had to pick a favorite Wilder film at this point in my life, it would be Avanti.
Wow. Really?
And I just love it. I wrote a review of it for Film Heritage. I called it The Importance of Being Ernst, because Wilder was trying to do a Lubitsch kind of film throughout his career, and he finally succeeded, in my view, with this beautiful romance. And, the fact that it died at the box office, I don't think should matter anymore, because it was not a film for its time. It's a film for all time.
Yeah.
And when people see it today, they usually like it a great deal, because it's a lovely film. It's about a jaded guy and a sexually liberated young English woman who reenact the romance of their dead parents, and it's very consciously emulating the past, and that was not what the audience wanted to see at the time, because it was the period of now, and like don't trust anybody over 30, etc. But it's a very lyrical, funny, sweet, and it's also very visually beautiful, like Sherlock Holmes is. Wilder was starting to go on location more and deal with a kind of visual romanticism and kind of genre noirish quality that he has in his later films. And the landscape is lovely, and the Italian island of Ischia. And Avanti is, again, it's a film about liberation from sexual repression and prudery. And it has a lot of political satire of the Nixon era and the right wing in America. It's like Foreign Affair in that regard. And even at the time, I didn't quite focus on how important that is, but Wilder said in an interview in France that Avanti was a lesson for Americans. It was kind of a commentary on what's wrong with American values in terms compared to European values. And again, it's this ugly American character. That term became known in the 60s when there was a novel of that title. But the brash, arrogant American overseas who gets his comeuppance and realizes how to fall in love and be a mensch. Again, that's the theme of that film.
This is one that we definitely don't disagree with. Let's go to our next, very briefly, to Front Page, again available from Kino Lorber Home Entertainment on Blu-ray. And I have nothing to say about it. To me, nothing about it works. The worst thing about it for me is the utter miscasting of Carol Burnett. For me, one of the most grating performances I've ever seen, and she agrees.
Well, I would agree, I talked to Wilder and Diamond. They both agreed.
Oh, they do? Really?
Oh yeah, and but she has a couple of powerful scenes though, because what the film is, it's based on the funniest American play, The Front Page by Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur, which I adore as an old newspaperman.
Oh, sure.
People love that play, but it's not as funny as the play because Wilder and Diamond were making a very dark, jaded view of journalism. They were counteracting the romanticization of journalists during the Watergate period. It's really a film about Watergate as much as anything. It's full of references to Nixon and Watergate. And it's a very scathing portrayal of the callousness and corruption of journalism.
Well, Ace in the Hole is the king of that
it
genre.
fits in that camp,
Well, but there's you would agree there's no comparison between.
No, it's not as good a film, but I still like it. I think it's kind of an anti-nostalgia film, even though it takes place in the 1920s.
Well, now here's a film that I really like, and I totally admit that it doesn't work, but I like it, and that is Fedora, which is available on Blu-ray from Olive Films. And Fedora is a film that obviously is a throwback to Sunset Boulevard, and the audience threw it back. But I think it's very interesting, even though it doesn't work. But for me, the great performance in this film is William Holden. Since it seems to me that since The Wild Bunch, since his, let's face it, sort of comeback in The Wild Bunch, his performances deepened and became far richer. And I think Holden holds the film together brilliantly. I think he's wonderful in it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a reason to watch the film again and again, which I do. I have a curious affection for this film, which doesn't work. And you do mention in your book the problems with the leading lady.
Mart Keller. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Dick. Everything you say is true. I think it's a disastrous performance by Mart Keller, who is a terrible actress. And Wilder realized after a few days of shooting that she just wasn't right for the part. But he told me he thought it was uncastable because it's a very complicated story.
It is.
About a woman a former star who gets her daughter to impersonate her. And, how do you play a star who's impersonating a star?
You're right. This role is unplayable. Here's
my feeling, Dick. I think that her badness, in a weird way, works for the film because she is a woman who is desperate and unqualified to be a star, and she doesn't want to be a star. And it's a very dark tragedy about somebody who loses her identity, and her mother robs her of her identity. And she's flailing around in the role, and she can't handle it. And in a strange way, it works, even though it's just kind of, it's too bad they didn't have a better actress. But the film is beautifully written. When you read the screenplay on paper, it plays really well. But when it's translated into actuality with actors, it doesn't quite work. But Holden is superb, as you say. He's so jaded and so embittered, and his face is so lined.
I think it's possible I like this film, for all its faults, more than you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a great fondness for it, too. And I love Holden and The Wild Bunch and Fedora, as you say. I mean, he is very much a surrogate for Wilder as a old guy trying to survive in the film business, which is dominated by youth. And the film is about the obsession of the film industry and America in general for youth, and the woman is trying to preserve her eternal youth through these grotesque means of plastic surgery and things like that. And it's a very bitter satire of the film industry, and it alludes, as you say, all the way through to Sunset Boulevard, but it deals with the new Hollywood clashing with the old Hollywood.
I think it's well worth seeing, and we're almost out of time. And we're going to give Buddy his Billy Wilder's next and last film its due by totally ignoring it.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the case.
But
it's a real dud, yeah.
What I don't want my audience to ignore is this marvelous book that you've written, Joe, called Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge, which is available through Columbia University Press. If you like these shows, this is the book to read. Well, Joe, I just cannot tell you how grateful I am for your spending so much time on our show talking about Billy Wilder. And I'm going to remind our audience that Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge, by my wonderful guest today, Joseph McBRIDE, is available through Columbia University Press. And if you like these shows that we have just done together, I can virtually guarantee that you'll find the book fascinating to read and a real keepsake. It's a marvelous book. I congratulate you, Joe. I mean, you've written, 24, 25 books?
Yeah, 24.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is what a delight to have you on the show, even though I do apologize for taking so much of your time. But
Oh, no. I mean, I'm thrilled you devoted so much time to Wilder in my book, and I loved our banter back and forth, and disagreements are stimulating, too, when we don't... I mean, that's part of the fun of studying film is that not everybody agrees, and you like different films and for different reasons, and it's always illuminating to talk to you because you know so much about film history, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. And if you'd like to hear some of my older, vintage shows, please go to www.dvdclassicscorner.net, where in addition to the broadcasts, you'll find hundreds of my print reviews of classic DVD releases. So, until next week,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.